of the Lubin School of Business. It's my pleasure to have Mr. Kevin Richards as our guest today on the Dean's Roundtable. Kevin is an audit partner at Deloitte, and he specializes in serving clients in the real estate industry, primarily with those with a national or global footprint. Kevin has over 20 years of experience serving public and private clients in the areas of coordinating and leading multi-location audits, reporting with the Securities and Exchange Commission, acquisition due diligence and accounting, and general business advisory services. Kevin's real estate experience includes leading the audit of one of the largest REITs in the United States, and he also serves as a technical accounting resource on leases and real estate transactions for the Northeast practice of Deloitte. Prior to his current responsibilities in client service, Kevin worked in Deloitte's national office, serving as the leader of the leases and real estate subject matter team in Deloitte's accounting, consultation, and research department. Kevin is a featured speaker at industry and technical conferences and has published in various real estate industry journals on the topic of lease accounting. Kevin holds a BBA, MBA Public Accounting from PACE, class of 1999. Please welcome Kevin Richards to the Dean's Roundtable. Mr. Richards, if you'd start by just telling us a little bit about yourself, and welcome.
Thanks, Larry. I feel like you've said a lot, said a lot about me, but I'll start from the beginning and kind of discuss how I got connected with PACE in my career since then. So I can't say that, I'm sure I'm not much different than many of the people on the call, in that in high school, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I had a best friend who seemed to live pretty well. He had a nice house, had a couple of cars, a couple of homes actually as well. And so I saw that his dad was the local accountant. So he was your local CPA, did people's tax returns and some bookkeeping for a couple of the mom and pop organizations in town. And he did pretty well. And so I said, okay, well, I want to be him. And I had an opportunity to talk to him, sit down, say, well, how can I be you? How can I get the CPA behind my name? And he said, go to PACE University. And at the time, PACE was, I would say, most well-known for the CPA, the accounting, the business school, that program. I know PACE is known for so much now, including some of the works you guys are doing in the arts. But at the time, it was a big accounting school, a big business school. And so only college I applied to. First to go to college in my family, and I didn't really know much about the application process or any of that, but he told me to go to PACE. And so I went there, and it was great. I mean, that was really the start of my career, so to speak, because once I got there, I played some sports from time to time. But I think, and I hope you guys are taking advantage of this, and you kind of need to ultimately in this time. But PACE is really good at placing its students in jobs before they graduate, right? So I didn't, before leaving PACE, I think I had taken high school. I think I took an accounting class there. Once I got into PACE, it was almost like I got into my career, right? I was taking classes for sure, but by my sophomore year, I had like jobs. All I had to do was go to the career center, and they had opportunities for me to do different things. And so hopefully you guys are still doing that, and it's still strong because of all of the links you have with local businesses. And by the time I was in my junior year, I was working for pretty big companies like Home Incorporated and other meaningful sized companies doing really first year, second year level work. And so I really have to credit PACE for giving me that kind of real life experience, not just the blocking and tackling that I think most schools would give you, by going to class and learning things, but really the real life experience that comes with, being the pillar of a community when it comes to academic intelligence. And so I took full advantage, and I would encourage everyone here to do that. I took full advantage of their scholarships. I took full advantage of the work opportunities. So, I mean, it was just probably the most meaningful 4 years of my life, and really, put me on this launch pad to start my career. Now, I started the career as most kind of accountants do. They get out, and then you would go to one of these big accounting firms. We used to call them sweatshops, but now I'm a partner there, so I would never call them that. They're great places to start your career, great places to learn and be productive. And I was very productive. I started at a place called Arthur Andersen out of school. Some of you might have heard of the Enron scandal. Arthur Andersen and its 60,000 employees essentially disappeared in a day, and most of the employees went to other firms. I went to Deloitte and Touche. What was great, I think, during that process, besides seeing something so epic and being part of something so epic, it was, having PACE on my resume. I never felt concerned about getting a job, right? And so it was strange. It didn't. My GPA was good, right? It was definitely fairly good, and Anderson was a great organization, but the amount of partners, the amount of chief financial officers, the amount of people in the area that, when I say area, I mean from New York all the way up through Connecticut, right, and around, that have ties to PACE and appreciates PACE's contribution to the business world in terms of their human capital is significant. And my first taste of that was when Anderson went down. I could have gone to another firm, I could have gone somewhere else, but when recruiters see, I went to PACE and I had a pretty decent experience there and a few years in public, I was fine. In worst case, I could always call up, some of my, whether it be Healy or some of my professors, whether it be, any of them, Reisig, Healy, anyone, and get a recommendation. Those guys have been around for a very long time and they know a lot of people. So it's, again, having the ability to start your career in such a place that's deeply rooted into the financial community is really, really amazing. At least it was for me. And so went on to Deloitte, and all those things that Larry mentioned, occurred. Really very nurturing place, the firm I work. I think many of them are, whether it's PwC, E&Y. I know Larry's got roots there. Great firms, KPMG, even with all their troubles, they're a great firm. And so I'm biased to Deloitte because I see what we've done there, but all the firms, I think, one, they cherish their PACE University alum, and two, they're great places to start an accounting career, if that's what the folks on this call is mainly interested in. First few years, very difficult. They should be really weeding people out. You learn a lot. You can either lean in or you can kind of get out, but in any case, you'll be fine. You get through those manager years, which again are probably, the senior years are tough. The manager years are tough in a different way. It's all about kind of those personal skills and interpersonal skills and meeting people and building a strong network. And while you're, again, continuing to learn. And then when you get into kind of senior manager and partner, it's all just about luck and timing and ability and does things work from a work-life perspective. But that's something you'll navigate, and I had to navigate, and I had a lot of fun doing it, frankly. And so now, we're in this crazy world where we're all on Zoom. We're using technology in ways that you could never imagine. And I think, this group is really blessed. Ultimately, when you get out, no matter where you go, the type of work you'll be doing doesn't feel like accounting anymore. It really is. It's like you're joining a tech firm. You're using data analytics. You're you're using AI, you're doing things that I couldn't even imagine when I started my career, nor did I think I had the skill set to do. We've got almost all of our work papers in the cloud now. I mean, people are working simultaneously on things. And then the companies that we're auditing, the companies that we are providing services to, are just so dynamic. And every day it's like, oh, here's another cutting edge, revolutionary project. And they need, you know, kind of the biggest firms to work there, working with our consulting folks or advisory folks. I am, and I'm in real estate, right? I mean, it's pretty basic, right? You collect rent. It should be fairly straightforward. But even then, some of the evolutionary technology that's coming across, even in real estate, is dramatic. And so the past 20 years have been really, really exciting for me. I can, you know, dive into any area that this group wants to hear a little bit more about. But generally, you know, I think you guys have a lot to look forward to, and, you know, PACE should continue to provide a good basis for that. I know I sit on the advisory board, and I'm in reasonably constant contact with, you know, the professionals over there. And so I know that they're grooming you well for the future.
Well, thanks, Kevin. I appreciate that very much. Let me start. I'll first invite students to ask questions either by raising your hand in the Zoom function, or you can just jump right in and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat, and Ileana will be manning the chat for us. Let me start by asking you a question since you're in the real estate business. When I worked in public accounting for a while, I was on the IPO audit for a REIT. And I remember there were different issues with REITs, like FFO, they called it back then, funds.
I still do.
Could you talk a little bit about REITs? I don't know how much students get a chance to learn about that, the real estate world.
Yeah, so, you know, it's interesting. What I liked about accounting is that it's a great place to go if you don't know really what you want to do in business. I knew what I liked, but I didn't really understand, okay, well, how do I do what I like? And I always liked real estate. You know, my mother owned a few homes, and she managed it. I helped her manage some real estate here or there. And so I want to say 6 or 7 years in to my career, when I went up to national office to do consultation, I picked up some real estate related consultations and leases and things like that. And I was like, boy, I really like that business model. I like how it works. It's really dynamic because it's a financial services company, these REITs, right? Except the bond is the asset itself. It's the building. And so if I have a building, it's a, you know, $1 million building, FedEx rents it, and they pay, you know, 6% of that value over the course of 20 years, I essentially have a bond. And at the end of the 20 years, I get the building back, right? And except that building might be worth more than $1 million at that time. And so that's how REITs work. REITs are really an opportunity for an investor who doesn't necessarily want to go and buy a house or have the capital to buy a building, to say, I'm going to buy stock in a company that buys buildings, and they're going to pay me a dividend at a market rate or whatever the rate, you know, is relative to the price of the stock. You know, I'm not, you know, here to give investing advice, but with the impact of the coronavirus and other things, there's a lot of REITs that are way undervalued, and you could do just as well in these REITs as you can in cryptocurrency, believe it or not. But that said, you know, when you think about the value of a REIT, you have to say, well, here's the underlying asset, and here's the cash flow that they're getting. People are using that building, whether it be an office building, an industrial building, a residential building, they're paying rent, and that rent has to be distributed to the shareholders. So just really, really great, really simple business, but great business. And also, again, on the verge of so many enhancements from a technology perspective.
Very good. Yeah. I'm pausing.
I have a question, but again, I do want to encourage students to send me questions in the chat. And actually, I have a question in the chat, so we're going to ask that one.
Okay.
Okay. I'm becoming a real estate agent in January. What services do you recommend I use to keep accounting on track? Is there something better than QuickBooks for when I start to manage my own priorities in a couple of years?
Yeah, software is tricky. If you're becoming one in January, then I think QuickBooks is fine because you can delineate between different buildings, different assets that you own and manage them. Once it becomes, I would say it's not really the amount of buildings, but the amount of tenants. Once it becomes a more meaningful amount of tenants, then you would see what software would really capture that, whether it be something a little bit more meaningful. But the problem with software is that it's constantly changing, constantly being enhanced. So when you say a couple of years, there could be, brand new software and tech out there to use. And that's the type of technology, that's what I mean. It's constantly, changing within real estate. So depending on the number of leases, that's where you really have to focus on. If it's, 5 buildings, but each building is a residential complex and they have 100 leases in, 500 leases you can't really manage on QuickBooks. The level of automation just isn't there for you. But if it's 5 buildings and you've got 4 or 5 people in them, that's something you probably can do.
Thank you.
Problem. Oh, you're on mute.
The question was asked by Jake Martin, and he said thank you, by the way.
Thanks. No problem, Jake.
Another question. You mentioned that you have been in different firms. What are the pros and cons of jumping from one firm to the other or staying at a firm for a long time? Do you think there are pros and cons to each?
So I jumped only because Anderson went under, right? So Anderson disappeared, so I had to go somewhere else. If I didn't, I wouldn't have left Anderson. The only advice I'd give you is, if you do an internship or a leadership, program or anything like that, don't get too caught up in, the fanciness of things, right? And so they'll take you to games, they'll take you to great places to eat and hang out and spend a lot of money to recruit, essentially. I would actually spend time, as much time as you can, as awkward as it may feel, just hanging out with the people, right? And, you only get access to a few people. When I say the people, not the recruiters, right? The recruiters are all beautiful and wonderful and they all feel great to talk to and hang out with, that's fine. I mean, really, even if it's a random staff person or a senior or a manager or even a partner, particularly partners, spend time with them, even if it's a few minutes here or there, get a vibe. That vibe, the longer they've been there, that vibe is essentially the culture, right? And so spend time if you can. Again, you're not going to spend hours and hours with partners, but don't be bashful in introducing yourself. Pay attention to response when you introduce yourself, and that's kind of your first step or first feeling, right? That feeling, that's your gut. It's going to develop your gut, and you should kind of go with your gut. In terms of coming or going or leaving, if you want to be a partner in a firm, if you think that's your long-term goal, once you get in, you really shouldn't leave. Right? Only because in order to make it it's a partnership, right? So it's not something that you are entitled to get, right? People have to like you. At the end of the day, you could do good work, you could do bad work, you could do whatever. Someone's gonna like you. And a lot of people have to like you. And that's the bottom line, right? And so if you leave and come back, it makes it, or leave and go somewhere else, you have to foster and develop new relationships again. You've got to build a network again, And that's difficult. When you start with a starting class and you work your way up, it's much like when you started with that friend in kindergarten or grammar school. If you saw them when you were 25, it's like you're fast friends again, right? Because that's your network. That's that they knew you when you were nothing. If you go into another firm as a senior manager, they don't know you, and they also think you want something from them, right? They don't think of you as just someone who grew up with them, who wants to talk or whatever, and have that care for you. At least that's what I've seen. When I went to Deloitte, because we went with others, I did already have kind of that network from Anderson and other Anderson folks that came over, but I had to establish a new set of friends as well. And so that I was young enough, so that worked out, but that takes a lot of time and it can stall your development if you choose to stay with a firm. If you don't choose to stay with a firm, or if partnership is not really what you're focused on, then then jumping isn't that big of a deal, particularly if you're jumping to get into a new industry or you're jumping to do something different. A lot of people leave, let's say, a firm that they're doing accounting, they're doing auditing for, because they want to get into M&A. And if they want to get into M&A in their current firm, they have to wait 18 months. So instead of waiting 18 months, they'll just say, okay, I'll go to another firm and I'll do M&A now.
PACE has a winter internship program where students can work, and your firm participates, where they can work during January, February, those early spring or first of the year months, which is traditional busy season. How important is that to students who want to go into public accounting to get that kind of busy season experience?
Yeah. So the experience in winter versus summer is different. But what you should try to pull out of either of those experiences is, do I like these people? Do I like the culture? Am I a good fit? It's easier to pull that out of the winter experience because you're with people at their worst, right? They're miserable, right? And now it's not so bad because they're working from home, but generally they're miserable. They got a lot of work. They're working 12 hours. They're on the phone with you. And if like this is the real person you're dealing with, this is the real way this firm operates. Whereas in the summer, it's like, oh, let's go to a ball game, let's go for 3-hour lunches, and so there's a little bit of they're at their best, right? They're happy. There's a lot less stress in the system in the summer. So if you can get a winter one, you'll definitely get a real feel of the firm. But in either case, that's what you're looking for, is just trying to get to know the best of the people that are there.
There is a question in the chat. As a computer science major with a great interest and minor in finance, what types of opportunities are out there in terms of fintech at Deloitte and elsewhere?
And so Deloitte, if you look at their symbol, it's a green dot, right? Which essentially is supposed to mean, like, Deloitte and there's a green dot, essentially means we do everything, right? And so across the spectrum of professional services, we provide it all. Now, we, again, are saying now that we are essentially a technology company. So if you have that type of background, you can do so much within the firm, in our advisory practice or consulting practice, and even in our accounting and auditing practice. I think having kind of an MS degree, getting that computer science degree does give you a step on others to some extent, because you understand how the sausage is made, if you will. Now, applying it to business all depends on the function you're in. And so if I am in my advisory function and someone needs me to come in and do something specific to my skill set, but what you have to figure out is what the skill set is first. And that sounds somewhat confusing, but you have this background but the business part of that degree isn't defined or specific enough, right? And so we find people have with the degree you mentioned, or with the concentrations you mentioned, if it's too broad, there's almost nowhere to go, right? Because you almost have to get it so that even if it's broad, you still know what you want and you get an opportunity in what you want to do, and then you can utilize those skills. So accounting is, and I might be biased, right? But it's very specific. Like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to be an accountant, and this is what accountants do. So now you're saying, well, this is what accountants do. They work for one of these firms and they do accounting, but they're also using technology there. And that's your leg up, right? Because you can now use technology better to do accounting. I would say the same thing would work with marketing, right? You can use technology better to deliver that specific science. You could, so you couldn't just have a general business, because then it's like, where am I going to go with that? Or at least you could, but you'd have to figure out where you want to go with that.
Thank you. Someone else asked, what clubs were you in that helped a lot with getting you the network opportunities you mentioned?
Clubs in PACE?
Yes.
So, the accounting group had a club. What is that called? They must still have it. It's Accounting Society?
Accounting Society in Pleasantville and Beta Alpha Psi in New York City. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was a part of the Accounting Society, and this is the Beta Alpha Psi. That's the thing I've got framed up over there behind me. So I was a part of, I guess, both of those. I didn't know you had to be in New York City for one. I was in Pleasantville. I think I only had maybe one class in New York at one point.
Yeah, I think it used to be in both places, but not now, unfortunately. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then in terms of the network, though, so PACE, again, inside of PACE, make a lot of friends, particularly in your accounting group. So what generally happened, at least what happened to me and what happened for years after that. So I don't know, I'm assuming it's still happening. If you get a class of, I don't know how many, let's say, 30 people in your class, you're going to know most of the people in your class. We used to study together and all that. And they're almost all going to go to some manner of a public accounting firm, or they went to some manner of a public accounting firm. That's your network now across firms, right? So if something goes sideways where you went, if you are going to make that change, you can make that very quickly, and they'll be happy to bring you over because they'll get a little bonus by having you come over to their firm, right? And so, that's your network across firms. Now, what's even more beautiful than that is, as that network gets older and older, the vast majority of them do better and better in their career, right? And so, if I think about the people that I used to have studied with at PACE, a couple of them are partners. I think you guys know Nick Boetti and others that are still actually active in PACE. A couple of them, like George, he's a CFO. We've got leaders in finance. So those people end up helping you when you're thinking about, your own career, and is particularly if it's in professional services. But let's just say you want to make a career change. The big benefit of PACE, particularly if you're into New York City and you think you're going to stay around, is the network is so strong, just of your class, right? That people you can call and say, I'm thinking about making a career change. I know you did this. And pivoted that way. Can you sit and talk to me for a little bit over a beer? And I've had that call, and I've made that call, many times over the 20 years, and it's great. And not to mention, you just have lifelong friends, which is also great.
We have another question in the chat. What value do you see of being a member of a national professional groups such as Beta Alpha Psi, NABA, Ascend, etc.? Do you think being part of these groups helps in any way in your career advancement? I am asking this because a lot of firms go to schools to meet students directly.
Yeah. It doesn't hurt, right? I think what you need to do is ensure that, your eyes on the most important prize, right? Your eyes on the ball, you're getting the right grades, you've got the right resume. What the professional groups does, that helps with the networking, right? It gives you more opportunities to potentially meet someone that'll have a significant influence on your career. And that's great. And that's really, really important. But once you have that opportunity, you've got to present something. When they say, well, show me your resume, it's got to be good, right? And so it might give you that one additional opportunity or two additional opportunities, right? That someone else might not have. But when the opportunity knocks, you've got to be able to strike. And if you can't strike because you took your eye off the ball because you have too many of these things, well, then that's kind of where things go a little sideways. But those professional organizations, as long as you don't go overboard, are a great way to meet new people, meet different people, and for you to have to essentially create opportunities for you.
You talked a little bit about data and how you use that when you do your accounting work and the auditing and stuff. Could you talk a little bit more about that and what specific tools, if there are any that aren't proprietary, that you'd recommend students trying to get some exposure with?
Yeah, I mean, listen, big data, that's what it's all about now, right? And so we used to when we audited, let's say revenue, right? I've got let's say we talk about real estate companies, right? So I've got a real estate company, huge, I've got assets all over the country, all over the world, actually. And we used to say, okay, we've got 4 or 5 billion in revenue. Let's pick 75, 80 leases, and it would take us 3 weeks to just go through those leases, recalculate those leases, go through each agreement and each amendment since the lease was executed, and make sure it was appropriate. Then, so that took 3 weeks. Then we got AI, right? And the AI allowed us to read the leases, and what would pop out would be things to investigate, things that were off, let's say in terms of lease terms or things that might have an accounting issue. Now, when I say read the leases, I mean every lease, right? So we went from looking at 75 to we can look at the full population, tens of thousands of leases, right, in a day or two. They can, and they spit out a report, right, that we review. Now we're at a point, because this information is on the cloud and all the leases are on the cloud, we can take all the data from all the public, all the companies that we audit, right, and look for anomalies in leases. So terms that are not just an anomaly for the specific company I'm auditing, but anomaly across all the leases that are out there. And so that allows us to audit so much more efficiently. And by the way, that happens in a second, right? It happens, very, very quickly. And that allows me to drill down my audit. So it's a risk-based audit, where before we didn't know this at the time, we were just shooting in the dark, right? Or like, oh, let's pick 75, let's see what happens. Da, da, da. Now it's like, no, we can identify an issue like that across an entire portfolio, and that's to me just amazing. So that's how kind of the data analytics come into play.
Kevin, I believe we have someone raising their hand. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah.
If you could unmute yourself. I just heard him.
Yeah, but he's muted now. Oh, there you go.
Go ahead.
Perhaps an internet problem, perhaps. Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, the hand is up, yeah.
I suggest you log out and log back in. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. We tested his mic. Okay, I'll see if he can send me the question in the chat.
Let me ask you in the meantime, Kevin, if I may, the life of public accounting, as you mentioned, depending on the time of the year, it can be tough. What's your typical day like? If you don't, when do you go to bed? When do you get up? Without getting too personal. I mean,
No.
what's your day like? Yeah.
Well, listen, I think, this group and going forward, you're in a great time. I mean, this COVID thing was horrible, but in terms of its impact on work-life balance, it changed the entire game. I mean, I was flying all over the world for a good portion of the last 10 years, which was great, and I thought I enjoyed it. And I did enjoy it. But so every day was different, right? Because it depended on where I was going to be in that particular day, what I was going to do. And certainly the partner life is a lot different than staff or first year. So it used to be, you just kind of woke up, you went to a client site, you worked all day, generally. And then you get home during busy season, which is anywhere from January to about March. You might not go home. You might just go in a hotel and come back to work the next day, because those days were much, much longer. And then, in the summertime, you might never go to work, right? So it's just, we try to balance it out, but you might have some days or some weeks where you're just not that busy and you're just kind of living, which is great. It was always good. It was every time, you headed to a busy season, you were like, oh, this is going to be a nightmare, but you knew in April, May, and June, more so in June, July, and August, actually, you were going to have a pretty light lift. So it kind of made up for it. Now, though, you essentially are eliminating the commute. And, you don't really have a sense of how difficult or how much time that commute takes. Because when people talk about the commute, they talk about door to door, right? But now it's not just door to door, it's like getting dressed. If I'm not going to be on a Zoom call that day, I mean, I do get dressed, but it's not a shirt and tie and jacket and all that. And that takes up a lot of time, right? I see my kids off to school, I make dinner almost every night. It's just, it's fantastic. It's really changed a lot. And, I might get back on afterwards. But for the last year and a half, it's been extremely flexible. Now, I personally don't think it's healthy not to go in. I try to get in 3 days a week, just somewhere, right? Whether it's up to Boston, I still travel a bit. For me, it's really important to get out because we're trying to sell business as well. We don't mandate our people going in. Obviously, they have to feel comfortable, but generally, and this is just my personal view, is not Deloitte's view, but if I'm starting my career, I want to be around other people. I want to look at people in their eyes. I want to show them that I'm eager to learn more. And, what we do, it's not rocket science, right? You'll get a great foundation and pace. But like I said, in the beginning, in order to be a partner, people have to like you. They got to spend time with you. They got to hang out with you. They got to have lunches with you. They got to, if you drink, they got to drink with you every once in a while. They got to understand what's going on with your home life and, make sure you're not crazy. Just basic things that you can't do over, 30 minutes in Zoom here and there. You gotta spend time. So although, many of the places that you guys end up going, they may still, even when you're there, allow you to work from home. I would really temper some of that, right? And it's going to feel good. It feels good to work from home. You get a lot more work done. You're so much more efficient, and you don't have the commute. You don't have a lot of costs associated with it. But what you do miss out on is just the person-to-person interaction. That we're an apprentice culture. You got to learn from someone, and there's nothing better than being right next to them and spending that time. It really, you don't know it right away, but over time, that's really the key.
Myeojung?
I'm Yu Jung. I brought my students of financial accounting class today. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you.
Okay, good. There are lots of students who are not decided about what they're going to study, especially accounting. If you could give something that they could hold on to become interested in studying accounting, what would that be?
Yeah, and I think, when you think about accounting, I know I'm not the only person that thinks this. Someone told me this, and they're 100% right. Accounting, if you're not sure where you want to be, is the perfect place to be. Because there isn't a business still today that doesn't need their books done. Someone needs to track the income and expenses of every organization. So if you want to be in business, you're going to need some sort of accountant to help you. And so if you are someone who is uncertain where in business you want to be, even if you want to be on an operations side as opposed to the financial side, but if you're uncertain what industry or what interests you, spending a few years as an accountant, it's the best way to learn the business. You'll learn about the processes of any particular business in any industry. And if you don't like it, let's say you say, oh, real estate sounds interesting. Let me do that with Kevin. 2 years into it or a year or two into it, you're like, this is awful. It's ridiculously boring, right? I want to try something new. You can, because although the industry might change, the basics of accounting stay the same. So now you learn a different industry, and you can bounce around like that until you figure out what you want to do. And so that's always been the pull to accounting. And that's, why our turnover is somewhat high. Someone comes in, they say, oh, this is really great. I like doing the books for this company. I think I'm going to get on the operations side, or I think I want to actually go to that company and work for them. Or a company like it. And so I do think it's one of the best places to start your career if you're unsure.
Thank you, Kevin. Let me ask you about relationships and mentorships. Did you have a mentor when you were at Pace? Anyone that you had an impactful relationship with during your time at Pace?
So many. I wouldn't. I couldn't say one name. I'm just going to say my professors. My professors for sure. My counselor was amazing. There's just so many. There's so many. I couldn't name just one person, because and I don't know what New York is like versus Pleasantville, and I don't know what things are like now, but it was a very nurturing environment, right? Anytime I had an issue, it was like there was 3 or 4 people. As long as I was willing to voice it, there were 3 or 4 people that were willing to help. Didn't have a lot of cash. My advisor, put me in front of a book of scholarships, right? And it was like, just keep applying to these and see what happens, right? And that really helped. Didn't, have a job. Well, they were like, well, you're doing really good in accounting. Why don't you be I was a tutor in the Lubin Center there in Pleasantville. So I did the tutoring for a little bit. And then I learned about the graduate assistantship, which was like money in the bank. I don't know if you guys, again, still do that, but that's like a home run. If you guys can get involved in that. I was a graduate assistant for marketing, and I actually built a website, and they realized how bad that was. So I think they went to like outside vendor to actually build a real one. But it was like at the very beginning of these website things. And so it was just so many people that were out there to help me. So I couldn't name one.
A follow-up question. What failures have you personally or indirectly seen as a professional in your early years after graduating that you would advise students to avoid? And a follow-up, what keeps you motivated?
Well, actually, those are 2 very similar questions for me. What keeps me motivated is money. I want to make a lot of money, right? The more, the better, right? So I'm motivated by cash. I'm one of those people that are motivated by checks. But that was actually the biggest failure, right? So when I started, I was focused on, a couple $1,000s here or there, and that actually even drove the decision to go to Anderson. Even though I liked some of the folks at Deloitte a little bit better, but they were going to give me, I think an extra $1,000 or $500. I was like, oh, I got to go there. It's great. They must like me better. And then I was so overly focused. I was generally a good performer, but I was so overly focused on my performance reviews and getting the highest review, because the highest review meant the highest raise theoretically. Again, difference between, being the best performer and the worst performer, wasn't much. And ultimately, if you're the worst performer, you get kicked out after a couple of years. But the difference isn't much, and that's not where the money is. The money is not, until you make partner, the money's not there, right? The money is in what you learn. And so I was, instead of taking the feedback and just developing my skill set, I would get upset and say, okay, this is bullshit. I should get paid more. I should be a higher thing. You don't know what you're talking about, whatever. And a lot of times I didn't know what they were talking about, and it was bullshit. But I was burning a bridge and didn't even realize it for $500. It is the silliest thing. And meanwhile, if I just took their feedback, made a couple of tweaks, that person would feel good because that person feels like they gave me something, right? I would still have a strong relationship with them, or those people. And my career might have been even sweeter, because again, I would have taken something and gotten better at it. So I guess my advice, and you guys will face this, you're on this call, you're interested, you want to do well. You're going to be type A personalities that are just go, 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 go. And you got to realize that sometimes you got to take a step back and just, people are the most important thing. If you treat people right, develop nice relationships, listen, I'm not saying to be a pushover, and if you're wrong, you got to push back for sure. But, be careful about damaging relationships and make sure it's really, really worth it.
How do you have any advice on how to better prepare for the Deloitte winter internship? And what are some expectations for interns or from interns?
Yeah, the expectations are used to be relatively low, right? The internship is an opportunity for us to interview you and for you to interview us. That's really what it is. We don't think we appreciate that you don't not know the Deloitte way, and you might not ever need to know the Deloitte way because you probably have another place that you're thinking about as well. But when you come on board, you look at our tools, you learn a little bit about our tools, you learn about the technology that we're using. Most importantly, you get to know the people, and you feel comfortable with the people. You feel comfortable with the culture of the organization. That's the most important thing, because that's what they're looking for in you, right? Is, hey, does this person fit in the culture? Right. And that's the most important thing. So I would just focus on how do your interactions make you feel? They will be, giving you work to do, and you'll do your best, and you'll have questions, ask the questions, and you'll work through it, and that'll be fine. But really focus on how the interactions make you feel.
Do you recommend specializing in one specific field, or to specialize in 2 or 3 fields?
I'm a big believer, if you're kind of the jack of all trades, you're a master of none, right? And so I personally think you should specialize, but you should try different ones before you do that, right? And so you want to be, eventually, if whether you stay at Deloitte or anywhere, if you want to be very successful, you have to build a brand, right? You've got to be known for something, right? That's why these guys on social media do so well. You know, they've built a brand. It's the same thing in business. And so, you know, my brand at one point was leasing, right? And so when the new lease standard came out, everyone in the firm was calling me about leasing. And so that propelled my career because I built that brand. If you kind of are good at everything, you can get a brand as like best athlete or strong athlete, but then you really need people to pull you up because there's a lot of strong athletes, right? Whereas if you say, okay, I've tried a bunch of different things, I really like real estate, or I really like investment management, or I really like commercial, I really like, you know, retail, and I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to be the person in retail. With our 80,000 employees, believe it or not, there's only a few specialists, and there's a lot of things to specialize in, but there's still only a few people to call when there's a particular, on any particular issue. So if you can wedge yourself into a niche like that, while still having broad capacity, but just say, hey, when someone thinks of leasing, they're going to call Kevin Richards because this guy, he's seen all kinds of leasing. That's your brand within the company, and it ends up expanding outside of the company.
Who is someone you look up to and why, and what is the best advice someone has given you?
I look up to so many people. You know, I look up to a lot of people that, you know, people on this call might not even know because of what they've been through to get to their level. Minorities, particularly, you know, Black men and Black women. You know, even if you kind of take a gander on the people that are showing their picture on here, it's a minority, right? And so if you think about, you know, the amount of partners that are Black at these firms, it's very small. And that's for a number of reasons, but it's very small. And so, you know, what they had to go through the 20 years before me, and now they're looking at retirement, is why I kind of look up to them to be successful in that marketplace and to be a Black male or female. It's even more difficult if you're a female of any race, but I definitely look up to them and appreciate their sacrifices.
Let me jump into a question, one more accounting question, if I may, before we run out of time here. You talk about lease accounting and how you became an expert. I know when was it 2019, the lease rules really changed dramatically. How did that affect your clients' behavior in any way? I'm sure you got a lot of good consulting engagements out of implementing the new lease rules, but how did it affect your clients' behavior?
No, I agree. And that, again, it's all about kind of some luck and some timing. So I was in national office in 2007 and 2008, you know, doing all the lease work. And so the way national works, if anyone has an accounting question on leases that they feel that they can't answer on their own, they call national. Me and two other people essentially pick up the phone and deal with the call and work through the issue. So again, building a brand, it's only 3 of us. We handle all the questions in the country and some questions from outside of the country for US filers. And so, you know, you spend all this time learning the old one. And then the new one came and people expected me to know, right? Which was fine, right? But when I was going through the kind of partner process, my shtick was, hey, I was going to lead all of these consultations that would ultimately come out of implementing the new lease standard. And so, yes, we had a whole workflow on implementing that standard across, because it affected almost every client, right? In one way or another, almost everyone leases or has something that seems like a lease. And so, you know, just educating our practice first and then educating our clients. We spent a lot of time doing that.
I have a final question.
Mm-hmm.
Did you choose an accounting concentration at Pace University? This student has an internal audit concentration at the moment, and they're wondering if a concentration would increase your chance to get a position at a firm.
Yeah, just do the accounting one. The internal audit one is fine, but then you're limited to internal audit essentially, right? If you do the accounting one, you can always do internal audit. So a CPA can always do internal audit. But for some reason, the view, if you have an internal audit degree, the view is not necessarily you can do sort of basic bookkeeping, accounting stuff. I don't know why that is. But if I wanted to be an internal auditor, I wouldn't have done anything differently. I would just ultimately say I want to do internal audit instead of external.
Look, we're just about out of time. I want to thank you very much for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us this afternoon and for sharing your expertise. You're a perfect example of a very successful alumnus of the Lubin School of Business and Pace University, and someone that everybody on this call should look up to and try to emulate. So I really appreciate your time this afternoon. As a small token of our appreciation, we have a gift that unfortunately I can't hand to you through the but there'll be something delivered to your home in the near future. But thank you so much for your time.
No, certainly my pleasure. It's the least I can do. The Pace has given me and my family so much. So anything you need ever, you just reach out, Larry.
Thanks. I look forward to working with you on the Lubin Advisory Board too. So yeah.
Perfect.
And thanks everybody for enjoying, for coming to the Dean's Roundtable this time. Have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you.
Take care.